Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the July 21st, 2020 public hearing, public meeting of the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission. I'll call the roll. Chair Carroll.
Here.
Commissioner Bland.
Here.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin.
Here.
Commissioner Chen.
Here.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum. Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Here.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Here.
Okay.
Good morning and welcome to the July 21st public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. We will be reviewing both public meeting items today as well as public hearing items. And if you would like to follow along, we are live streaming on YouTube. So go to our main channel on YouTube and you can watch all of the proceedings. If you would like to participate in today's public hearing session, you can join our webinar either by downloading the app through the web browser or by calling in. And at the beginning of each item, when we start to take testimony, we will give you the information to join the meeting at that time. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Preservation, Corey Harala, to start our agenda.
Thanks, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. We're going to start today's Preservation Department agenda with public meeting items. The first is item number 1, LPC 20-08010, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 153, Lot 18. 49 to 51 Chambers Street, the former Immigrant Industrial Savings Bank, individual and interior landmark, also in the African Burial Ground and the Commons Historic District. This is a Beaux-Arts-style skyscraper and interior designed by Raymond F. Almirall and built in 1909 to 12. The application is to alter the interior banking hall, install signage, a marquee and lighting at the Chambers Street facade, and alter windows and doors at the Reed Street facade. And just to note that at the public hearing of May 5th, 2020, there was a consensus of support for the concept of adapting the former bank interior for use as an immersive entertainment venue and making limited alterations at the base of the building. However, the commissioners asked the applicants to restudy the design and materiality of the proposed window enclosures and white box rooms within the space. Most commissioners asked that the historic teller windows not be cut and repurposed and instead be carefully salvaged and stored on site. Some commissioners also asked that the removal of, that the signage at the exterior of the building be substantially reduced. And lastly, the commissioners were interested in the reversibility and eventual removal of most of the installations in the future. The applicant team is here to present these revisions today.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ward Dennis with Higgins Claysbarth.
Sorry, just a motion.
Sorry, and I also
sorry.
just, yeah, and let me just, for the record, have a motion to open the proceedings. Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
All right, Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that?
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, you may begin now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for jumping the gun. Am I controlling the screen? There we go. Good morning, Commissioners. It's great to see everyone again. As Corey mentioned, this application is for 4951 Chambers Street, located on Chambers directly across the street from the Tweed Courthouse, right outside the municipal building and right outside our virtual window in the hearing room. The building is a individual landmark and located in a historic district. It was constructed in 1912, designed by Raymond Almirall for the Immigrant Industrial Savings Bank. Where am I? Sorry. And of course, the interior of the banking hall is also a designated landmark, and that is the primary focus of the presentation today and the proposal before you. Just as a reminder, the proposed use for this space, Culture Spaces, is a company out of France that operates a number of immersive digital entertainment exhibit venues throughout France. They take different kinds of spaces and repurpose them with video and audio systems that have rotating art exhibitions. The company also manages and operates a number of historic properties in France. So they have a lot of experience, both in terms of transforming these spaces, but also as custodians for the historic spaces. The proposal for 49 Chambers Street would be the first culture spaces venue in the United States. This obviously has been a long time in the making pre-COVID, but I think it's very important to note that even with everything we've been going through in the past few months, this project is still very much on track, and it will be a very different, I think, approach to banking halls than we're used to seeing, in that it will be bringing hundreds, if not thousands, of people a day through this space, making it a truly public space once again. So very different from a lot of the other banking hall and interior landmark transformations that we're used to seeing. Just as a reminder, on the left here, the way that the space will operate, it is a exhibit that is on a loop. So for the first 15 minutes or so of each loop, all the lights in the space will be up, as you see in the photo on the left, and the people coming through will be able to see all the architecture in its lit form. And then as the exhibit comes on, the lights will go down, the audio visual equipment will come up. All of the audio visual equipment, which we saw last time, is mounted high up, mostly concealed on cornices and the like. So when the exhibit is running for about an hour or so, and they have a few different exhibits during that hour, you're seeing what we see on the right here. So at the public hearing last time, as Corey mentioned, I think there was very broad support for the concept of reusing this space for the Culture Spaces exhibition. However, there were comments from the commissioners, and we were asked to restudy a few different areas. And these are shown here on the left, and with the corresponding numbers from our prior proposal here. The first, and I think most important, was how we were controlling light on particularly the Chambers Street side. And obviously, in order for this program to work, we have to control light within the space. We can't have any light leaking in. We also need to control sound, both the sound coming in from the outside, from Chambers Street, and sound coming out to a lesser extent. The way that we proposed that previously, the number one here, were very large fixed panels over the windows on Chambers Street and Reed Street to completely block the light and block the sound. We also proposed a series of boxes constructed on the floor of the banking hall, which were to control how people move through and also control the light. So if you look at the key plan on the left here, you can see shaded in green where we had proposed boxes, and most of the boxes were in this back area, which is outside the designated space, but they did extend south into this sort of narthex area of the space. The third area where we had comments was on the reuse of historic material. So as at many other banking halls, we are proposing to remove some sections of teller counters, a pretty minimal amount of removals. We had previously proposed to reuse some of this material to create, such as you see here, a return onto one of the boxes that we were constructing, and the commissioners asked us to restudy that. And then not shown in this photo, but the extent of exterior signage, which the commissioners asked us to restudy. So in looking at all this, and in particular looking at the windows and the light control, what we arrived at was something of a pivot certainly away from covering the windows. And what we are showing here in this sort of bronze colored enclosure is a curtain system. And this curtain system would extend across the entire south opening here. And that would be the light control. And this has a number of, I think, very beneficial effects and results in what I think is a very elegant approach to the control of light and to the recognition of both the architecture and the space. What this allows us to do is to eliminate all of the box construction on the narthex area. So now all of these new boxes that we are proposing are entirely on the non-designated floor area. This allows us to keep the Chambers Street windows open 100% of the time. So there will always be light coming through the Chambers Street windows. And in addition, we are no longer proposing to salvage and reuse historic material. Anything that is removed will be salvaged and stored on site for future reinstallation as needed. And then in addition, as we'll see at the end, number 4, we have significantly reduced the signage on Chambers Street and reorganized it so that it is much more in keeping with the architecture of the building and the symmetry of the building. And then this is an image with the curtains down. Of course, when the curtains come down, the lights will be down and the exhibition will be on. So this is not really a view that patrons would ever see, because when the curtains come down, we would be seeing the artwork. The other thing to note about this curtain system is that it provides the sound attenuation that we need between Chambers Street and the exhibition space by virtue of the curtains themselves and by virtue of this about 25-foot deep narthex area, which basically serves as a sound baffle. So we no longer need to control sound or light directly on the windows on Chambers Street. Looking at this in plan, this also has another benefit. One of the comments from some of the commissioners was, why aren't we using the main entrance as the main entrance? And what we see on left here is the outline of the designated space. This area sort of horseshoe around is not part of the designated space. Previously, we had proposed to come into a light controlled, sound controlled space through the side entrance of the building, and then patrons would come in, experience the exhibit, and then come out and exit through the main entrance. By using the curtain and by creating this whole narthex area as a light controlled space, we're now able to bring all the patrons through the main entrance for the entry. This area will remain lit, and then the box area, the boxes are now pushed back entirely off the designated floor area of the space. Patrons will come through. Of course, this is a double height space. The exhibition continues on the lower level via these existing stairs and the new stairs that we had shown previously. The customers, the patrons are allowed to go through the exhibit at their own pace, spend as much time as they want. They can spend the full cycle, they can spend more. And then when they leave, they would come out through the gift shop and then out through the side entrance. So we think that in addition to everything else that this does, being able to reorient the plan to the main entrance is a major plus. So how does this curtain system work technically? We have spent a lot of time looking at this and figuring out how to make it work in terms of structural attachments, in terms of controlling light and controlling sound. And at the center arch, what we are proposing is a long horizontal truss with a roller curtain within it. And then these side pieces that you see here in number 2, these are not structural, these are just tracks for the curtain. So the center curtain is structurally held up entirely up here via attachments into the structure at this end and at this end, very similar to the approach that we have proposed and shown you previously for the lighting truss attachments, which all sit up above the cornice here. So looking at this in further detail, on the left, the purple here is that curtain track and this is the slot through which the curtain runs. The curtain track itself and the enclosures that you'll see in a moment are entirely scribed around the architecture. So none of the projecting ornament on the building will be touched at all or removed or altered. The new installations will scribe around that. And because this is non-structural, it will only be attached via small masonry anchors at mortar joints to keep it stable, but this is not structurally supporting anything other than itself. And then up here, you see the truss with the roller inside. And we see here on the right in a section how that truss anchors back into the structure. Again, the same system that we were using for the lighting trusses. Do note that there are a couple typos in the notes over here. The enclosure is not to match the stone color, but is a bronze, as we'll see. So again, none of the architectural ornament is impacted by these installations. Everything goes around the ornament. This is a detail of those curtain tracks, so you can see the sort of very deep inset that we have to carry the curtain, which obviously controls the light. So by scribing around the architectural ornament and by creating these deep curtain tracks, we are able to keep all the light out. And then this is a view of the enclosure. The truss system that comes across here obviously leaves an open space up above. So this enclosure is not just decorative, it is part of the light controlling aspects of the installation. And again, the enclosure itself will be very lightly attached to the building in a non-structural way. The finish of the enclosure is a bronze finish, which is matching the finish of that we see on the teller windows in a moment. So this is a view from the north looking south to Chambers Street. The Chambers Street windows are fully open and uncovered. This is the view with the curtains up. And then with the curtains down, we can see the center curtain and the side curtains here. The side curtains are fully self-supporting. So this is a self-supporting truss, a vertical column with a truss up above and the roller. And these set into some inset areas on the side aisles that we'll see in a moment. So we can sort of tuck these away, and because it's self-supporting, there's very minimal attachment to the architecture of the building itself. So shown here is an existing view of the narthex area. Chambers Street is on our left. This drum here is the revolving doors, and on the right is one of the aisles, and then the center area. The structure that you see there is a former sales office for the condo that was a temporary installation that is now gone. But you can see the amount of light coming through these windows. This will be a permanent condition under this proposal. So this is a view with the curtains. Now, obviously, under our previous proposal, we could not show this view because this view would have been taken inside the gift shop or inside the ticketing area, depending on which side you were on. So now we've opened this up. We have pushed the enclosures in the side aisles back, and they're actually set back about 3 feet here. The doors here, we are proposing to remove one teller window to drop the sill to make a entry. Previously, we had proposed to remove 2, but we can now keep 1. These doors will remain fully open because the light control is at the north end of this box through these double doors. And with the curtains up, you can see the enclosure at the center, and then you can also see the enclosure tucked in to this space between the 2 columns here on the right. And here is the teller cages with the metal finish that will be matching with these enclosures. And then when the curtains come down, the center curtain comes all the way down to the floor. The side curtains come down and rest on the ceiling of the enclosure. So this, again, gives us all the light control that we need inside the exhibition space while the narthex remains fully lit at all times. Again, with the plan showing the removal of the boxes from the narthex area here. And then in red, we are showing the areas of teller counter removal. We previously were removing 2 sections of teller counter here at the ends of the aisles. Now we're just proposing 1. And then we're removing 3 teller windows in the center as before and dropping a sill up here. So in terms of overall removal, it's still very minimal. As I mentioned before, we will no longer be reusing any of the historic material that is removed. Everything will be stored on site, and we have a location to do that. In terms of the north area of the building, changes here are less so than on the south area, but I think from all the commissioners' comments, the primary area of concern at the public hearing was with regard to the Chambers Street windows. So this is a view looking north to the Reed Street windows. This is a stair that goes down to Reed Street. We are proposing box enclosure coming around the backside of this sort of apsidal area at the north end, and an enclosure over the windows. Modifications here, we have added some architectural detail to the boxes so that they're not quite as severe and read a little bit closer to the architecture of the building, but still trying to keep these very much as new insertions and reading as such. We continue to propose the enclosure for the Reed Street windows. However, we have modified this so that previously we just had a painted finish on there. We are now proposing a raised Munson grid that matches the Munson grid of the windows. The exterior of this enclosure will be painted black. As you can see, there's a depth to these enclosures because this is also providing sound attenuation. We think that this approach is appropriate on Reed Street because Reed Street is much more, it's almost, it's a very narrow street, almost like an alley. The experience of the windows and the experience of the light is very different than on Chambers Street. So by controlling light through the curtains on Chambers Street, we're opening things up a lot, and we do believe that keeping the enclosures on Reed Street is appropriate and consistent with the comments from the commissioners the last time through. So finally, the fourth area was signage. This is an existing view of the building with the center entry, existing historic sign vitrines. To the right here is the condominium entrance with a canopy, and there are 2 existing flagpoles on the building. The prior proposal with the window coverings would have a trompe-l'oeil effect, sort of drawing out the reflection of Tweed Courthouse behind. We had proposed to use the left-hand entry as the main entry, and because of that, we were working very hard to mark that entry. So we had a blade sign here and a canopy and 2 additional signs around the 51 entrance, and the main entrance would have been an exit, and we proposed banners at the windows and to use the flagpoles for signage as well. The revised proposal, because we're now using the main entrance as the main entrance, we can consolidate and reduce the amount of signage, and we can make all of the signage symmetrical around that main entrance. We are still using the flagpoles. These banners over the windows are now mesh banners to let light in, and as you can see, the windows no longer have the panels behind them to block the light. The existing sign vitrines will be reused for signage, and then we are proposing 2 board signs that would not be physically attached to the building, but would have a light source to them as well. And then at the left-hand entry, we've eliminated the blade sign, we've eliminated the canopy, and we've eliminated all of the signage around that left entry. So just going back to the before and the after, much less signage and much more orderly signage. The banner signs at the windows, as I mentioned, will be a mesh. These will just be stretched between two poles, one at the bottom, one at the top. And the board signs will use basically sort of like a curtain rod system, a pressure rod that will sit vertically between this cornice and this cornice, the water table and the cornice above. To hold a board sign, there will be a electrical power coming out through a mortar joint, but otherwise there will be no physical attachment or insertions onto the building itself. And none of these are LEDs, these are all static signs. So just recapping the proposal, and we can go back and forth to these as you have questions, but this is the view with the curtains up, light coming through the Chambers Street windows, with the curtains down, light continuing to come through the Chambers Street windows. And again, in this condition, the lights would be down and the exhibit would be running. We are no longer reusing any historic material within the space. Everything will be salvaged. View from the north, curtains up, curtains down. And then the view looking north with the lighting fully up. And then obviously with the exhibition in progress, this is what it would look like. And just to remind you, up here at the cornice is where all of the audio-visual equipment will be affixed. So that is it, and I'm happy to go back and answer questions. We also have Luke Archambault and Stephen Flintwood from Culture Spaces on the line, and Jonathan Taylor from HQ is also here to help answer questions.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for a very clear presentation about the 4 areas of concern and the response to those. Commissioners, do we have any questions at this time? If so, please raise your hand. And I'll give you, okay. Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead.
I think the curtain system is ingenious. It works very well. I'm questioning why not use the same system on the Reed Street? Why not just carry the same system through? What's the reason for the change?
I think it has a lot to do with the layout of the space, and let me get back to one of the plans. So we have arches here at the side aisles and the arch at the center. So this is the designated space. The curtain here would really be curtaining, if we did a curtain here, I'm not sure exactly where it would go, but it would basically be curtaining off the non-designated part of the space.
No, I meant by the windows, just regular curtains by the windows instead of the system you're using now. We first looked at using curtains on the windows themselves, particularly at Chambers Street, but also at Reed. And it becomes very intrusive to introduce the curtains around these windows because, let me see if I can get to a good view, but the way the architecture of the openings is, I don't have actually, wait, now I have a view coming up. The curtains would wind up having to be installed onto the face of the masonry in order to cover over the windows entirely. They can't really sit within the openings because you still have light leakage around the opening. So if I go forward, I have a couple existing photos sort of right up in the appendix. So it's hard to see here, but if you can't set a curtain in here and control the light completely. You have to have the curtain would have to basically go over a lot of the architecture here. You can actually see it better on Chambers Street, that you would basically have to have a curtain that extended over most of this architecture rather than inside the architecture. So it becomes a much more obtrusive installation than the panels that can set within the windows. And so once you make it operable and movable,
then it becomes harder to do.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin? Oh, Commissioner Chapin, did you have a question? No? Okay.
Yes,
She-
yeah,
I
yes,
got it. Okay.
yeah. When you were talking about the structure that holds the curtain, you said, you noted that, it said something about having it same, the stone color. When you look at the rendering of this from a distance, I can understand why you wouldn't use the stone color because it might appear to be part of the existing fabric. But I'm wondering if this bronze color may call attention to itself. And I'm just wondering if you considered any other materials and what your decision on that was. I mean, bronze obviously is in some ways very compatible with the other materials in the space. But there's a view where you have from the sort of, anyway, I'm wondering about whether you looked at other colors for this structure or materials.
We did look at other colors. We actually started with a shinier bronze, and then working with staff, toned it down in part to relate to the historic metalwork of the teller counters here. We did originally think of these as stone colors, and could we do it so that it would sort of fade into not being seen, but these are insertions. They're fairly simple once you get the enclosures on them. So we like the way that the metal reads as an insertion in the space and as a sort of clean feeling insertion. But that said, yes, color is something I think you can have a lot of different points of view on what is the right color, and we have been discussing this with staff, and certainly don't have any vested interest in any particular color.
Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts.
Okay, other questions? If there are any other questions, raise your hands. Okay, and not seeing any questions, I actually have one question. Have you started to develop the methodology for the removal of fabric, how it'll be removed, how it'll be labeled, stored, where it'll be stored, and a mechanism for its return should the culture space leave this interior landmark?
Sure. So I think there are actually two questions in there, because one would have to do with the new insertions that Culture Spaces is making, all of which I think are very reversible and would require minor repairs. The owner of the space, the owner of the building and the owner of the space has committed, and I think you have a letter, to removing anything that Culture Spaces does not remove. So any of these sort of very program specific elements, like the window coverings, like the curtains, etc. As with other banking halls where we have done this, the historic material that is removed will be labeled. There will be drawings that will be packaged in usually plywood type crates so that there is no damage to it, and that will all be stored on site, and that will be available for reinstallation if a future tenant comes in and wants to modify how certain openings are done, wants to put something back, or wants an opening over here but put something back over there. That will be fully available.
Okay, great. So that methodology and the letter from the owner has been submitted to the staff?
Methodology has not. We can work with staff on that.
Okay.
The letter from the owner has, yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
Sarah, I've seen a draft of the letter, and in its current form, it's fine, needing to be filled out with particulars.
Okay, great. Okay. All right. Now this is a public meeting item. This is not a hearing item. This item has already had its public hearing and the hearing is closed. So there is no testimony today. However, we do accept written comments on public meeting items. And so I just want to turn to Rich and see if we have received any written comments on the revised proposal.
Yes, we have received a letter from Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer and from Councilwoman Margaret Chin recommending approval of the application.
Okay, thank you. All right, so commissioners, if we don't have any final questions, I think we can move to our discussion on the item. And I'm going to start unmuting everybody. So if you, some of you have to accept that unmute. So just take a look at your screen. Okay, so, as was presented, the last time we saw this, I think the commission was very excited about this new use. This is a space I've actually walked through the space, and it's in pretty, it needs some care and it needs some repair and care, and it's been closed for some time. And I think that this is an exciting opportunity to have these interior finishes be restored and to be able to have the public experience the space. And so I think everybody embraced this conceptually. And there were these 4 areas, and sort of the largest issue for most commissioners were the windows, particularly those on Chambers Street. And then the design and materiality of the little box room enclosures. There were some concerns about reusing portions of the teller cages that were being removed. And then, of course, there were concerns about the amount of signage on the front. And so the applicant, as they presented today, has sort of made one big change that I think sort of pivoted everything, which was to redirect the circulation into the space. And so by using the main entrance, that allowed them to eliminate or reduce some of the signage on the front. It also allowed them to eliminate the enclosures that were actually in the designated space, so that now the only enclosures are in the non-designated spaces. And then the other big move was creating this curtain system on the Chambers Street side. And they've, I think, responded also to the comments about not reusing the historic fabric and salvaging it intact for potential future reuse. So there's a response to all 4 of the concerns that we had, and there may be some questions about finishes and details. So I'd like to start this discussion. And Commissioner Bland, would you like to start?
Sure. Well, first of all, this was a very good pivot. And I think the applicant was listening carefully to our comments the last time around. This is a very interesting and exciting space. And I think it's going to be wonderful to have the public now re-enter it for different reasons than banking, but nonetheless to experience the space. I'm hoping that this is programmatic, not under our control, that the public will be able to see the space without all of the light show as well. But I guess that's up to the program.
I think that is intended.
Okay,
there will be periods of time between exhibits. Perfect.
So I think as Eduardo has already suggested, I think the ingenious invention of this curtain system is terrific. I like the material that is being suggested as a counterpart. Clearly something added, not part of the original system, but others may weigh in on that as well. But this kind of unlocked the whole problem, allowing now the redirection of the circulation through the whole place. My only problem with the application as it is now is actually on the outside and the signage. I think there's still too much of it. And if we could flip to the exterior to show it. Yeah, okay, right, perfectly on the right. I think those 2 big signs over the windows are not needed. I would remove those two. And I think that floor where the flags are shown I think those are windows of private condominiums, I would have to guess. And if I were the owner of that place, I wouldn't want a flag flapping out in front of my window, nor do I think it's necessary to be up that high. I think with careful work, it might be lowered down and put more associated with the front door.
I
Yeah.
do believe those flagpoles are existing.
Oh, they exist? Okay,
Yeah.
well, luckily for those owners, then they're gonna have a flag flapping out their window. So I'll eliminate that comment. But I do think the two ones with Gustav Klimt are unnecessary, and so I would remove those. Otherwise, I think this is a great application and a great pivot. I want to just add, for interest's sake, the architect, Almirall, Raymond Almirall's grandson is married to my wife's cousin, and we see him frequently in Michigan when we go there, and we will be going there next week. And depending on how this works out, I'll be able to tell him of his new use of his extraordinary space. He's very proud of his grandfather and his work in New York, which includes work on Staten Island and many others.
Yes, that's right.
So thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
I agree with Commissioner Bland. I think a lot of these changes are terrific, and I also thank the applicant for hearing us and responding. I do think the curtain system works really, really well. It's very smart, and I like the metal housing, and I like the finish, and agree that it works not only with the style of architecture, but it ties into the Teller windows, which I think is great. I like the fact that they moved that box from the front out, and I'm so happy that the main entrance is going to be the main entrance to the building. I also have to say that I have a little bit of a problem with the signage on the front, but it's not quite the issue that Fred has. I think the big banners are fine, and they're over the windows. They're consistent with what we see in a lot of cultural institutions. The thing that I'm having a problem with is the addition of the new signage close to the base next to those smaller signage at the entrance. It seems like overkill to me. And I think if they take that out, I would be fine with it. Otherwise, it's a great job, and I'm excited.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
Oh, I think it's a marvelous solution. The curtain is very clever. On the signage, I can see the lower signage being at eye level being important. The hall, I think it says hall, detracts from that. So I would keep the smaller signage and get rid of the larger ones that you see from across the street. But I'm questioning the two signage, symmetrical, the hall signage on both sides. So maybe they should be smaller, less dominant. They should be rethought.
Okay. And Commissioner Gustafson.
I certainly agree that the curtain system is a much better idea. I think both as a visual and a practical matter. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution, and I do appreciate that they responded to our concerns. The signage, I think we're kind of, what I'm hearing so far is that we're kind of all over the map. I think we do agree that there's too much of it. The ones I don't like are the ones on the left and right of the door at the street level, and I think that's just because it hides the details of the building. You know, there's at that level, that's what people see, and they don't really need that with all of the other signage. I mean, I don't think I think they're going to be able to figure out what's going on in there without those two. My bigger concern is the same one I voiced the first time around, which was that once the original material is removed, we say, well, we're going to store it and what are conditions they're going to store it under. But the problem for me is always that it really never comes back. And one of the reasons for that is that we're usually talking about a long-term conversion of a building into another use. So that use will be in effect for a long time. In this case, the use is relative to that kind of situation. It's a short-term use. This may be here for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, but it certainly won't be forever. And at that time, the question is what happens at that time. So the things that become important are, number one, as others have already noted, the storage of that, careful storage of that original material. And number two is the removal, and I think I heard the commitment to this, the removal of all of the things that have been added. For example, the framework for the curtain, et cetera. So when this use is over, that all comes down. But the third piece is a commitment to restoring the original configuration, which is to say, once this use is gone, there are areas where the future use could incorporate the original configuration. It doesn't have to incorporate this new configuration. So that's where really my biggest concern is that they commit not only to storing it and removing it and removing the new material, but in putting it back somewhere down the road.
Okay. All right. And Commissioner Shamir Baran?
Thank you. I think John Gustafson's points are very important, and I hope that we can establish some protocol on keeping the material, but also returning it once this use has completed its tenure. But I do want to say that I think that the applicants have been so responsive to our thinking, to our original concerns, and it's helped them to innovate here and to really think carefully how it is that they use their platform in this particular space. And so I'm absolutely supportive of the proposal for the inside of the space, all aspects, and especially, as Jeannie said, Lutfi said, that the new entry at the center where the actual entry is to the building. I think that that's excellent. I also, though, would say that I am not in agreement with the commissioners about the signage. I think that all of the signage is appropriate. As we all know, that the experience of walking on that street at the building is for some reason, it's very narrow, and or you don't get a chance to kind of step back, because then you're kind of right on Chambers, and the Chambers is not kind of a slow walk, kind of Upper East Side, Fifth Avenue kind of experience. So I think that the signage at the ground floor experientially makes sense, but also does not undermine or take away from the experience and the quality of that tall plinth. And I think that the signage, as was said, on the actual windows is in keeping with other institutions. And I am never in opposition to flags, whether they're flapping outside my unit or flapping in the street. I think that they always have a sense of being kind of impermanent and don't compete with the solidity and the majesty of the building. So I'm very much in support of this project.
Sarah Holford-Smith.
Yes, I want to applaud the applicant for a really, really good pivot towards maintaining the windows on Chambers Street and coming up with a really ingenious solution for this curtain system. And I agree that the bronze finish, to me, seems appropriate to match the existing metals of the teller windows. So I'm fully in support of everything they've done on the interior, and I'd like to echo Commissioner Gustafson's concerns about the reintroduction of historic material once this exhibition is gone. Just make sure that we have a plan in place for that. For the exterior signage, I don't think it's too overwhelming. I think that the two larger banners, board signs at the ground floor are probably needed to help people understand what's going on inside, but perhaps they could be a little bit smaller. They seem a bit overwhelming. But other than that, I think it's completely appropriate. I support it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
I'm very happy about the changes that have been made. I think they're responsive to our concerns. And I also feel, it's a great project because the people will be able to see the interior during the 15-minute period that they have assigned for that. And I think it's rare that, you can get pretty much a sense of experience of what the space looks like when we're having various adaptive reuses. So I think this, and I think the use is a great use. So the interior changes I think are fine, and I think that the bronze, since it will be a duller finish, will work, and I'm glad that they're working with the staff on the best alternative to try to not draw too much attention to it. But I think the construction of it is excellent and is going to work out fine. As far as the exterior, I too find that the ground floor is a little, I think, distracting. But I do think that the banners are really a kind of a necessity, and that they, you want to see what's going on, the current focus of the particular exhibit. And it's very typical of what we allow on other institutions. I was thinking that the flags that they have, which identify the space, could easily also be something like what's on the lower part, and have a much larger way of projecting what is taking place in the space. If the flags weren't just a sign, but actually had a background of the colorful interior, that perhaps that would be a way of announcing what's going on in the space much more prominently without putting something on the building. I don't feel a little uncomfortable with the things on the ground floor, but I think everything else about the signage is fine.
Devonshire?
I think the changes that have been made to the interior are appropriate. I agree very strongly with John about both doing the disassembly and reassembly. There are organizations like the AIC that have standards for disassembly, packaging, and salvaging materials. I'm quite all right with the signage on the exterior. This is a strong enough facade, I think, that it can handle all of that. If the condo owners next to the flags don't like the idea of flags, and they can negotiate a lower price to the condo. I think that the hall flags need to remain the hall flags. Otherwise, again, that condo owner is going to be cursed with them changing the banners every time they change the show. So I'm fine with the exterior the way it is.
Okay, and Commissioner Chen?
So agree with the commissioner's comment. I won't repeat. It's much improved. The applicant did listen and improve over the circulation and the less damage to the original interior. And I agree with the commissioners such as Gustafson and Harold Smith and Adi about the restoring the originals, preserving them because this is a short-term use. I'm sort of, again, ambivalent about the outside. I tend to agree with Diana Chapin's comment. that I think historically we have approved similar signs for major institutions that are similar in monumental scale. So I have less problem with the giant, the so-called giant banners on either side. And I do agree with, I forgot which commissioner made the comment that on the ground floor, it is indeed, we pass by there all the time. As you know, this is just outside the LPC office. That on the sidewalk, you really cannot tell, even with the banners above, what is really going on interior. But I also agree with the comment that maybe the ground floor, the two on either side of the main entry could be smaller, because I'm not sure about whether that pressurized jack-up system, whether how much pressure is being inserted onto the existing structure. So I think the minimal, the less damage we can do to the structure, the better. But I think this is overall very good proposal, and look forward to seeing it.
Okay, thank you. All right, and I agree. I think that this is a very responsive application, and I think on the interior, they addressed all of our concerns very successfully. And you know, I think this move to redirect people through the main entrance solved many problems and allowed them to solve some of our concerns. And on the exterior signage, I agree with Commissioner Shamir-Barron that I think the way this is the way you experience this building on Chambers Street is not the way you sort of experience it if you're strolling down Fifth Avenue and looking at other institutions. This is a busy street where people are moving quickly, and the sidewalk isn't that wide. And so I think you don't actually, unless you're really across the street in front of Tweed, see all of these signs at once. And so I think they each have their own purpose. And as Commissioner Devonshire said, I think the building is strong enough that it can handle this. So I think there were some people who were supportive of the signs in general, and then some who suggested reducing the 2 signs flanking the entrance, and then some who had problems with 1 or more of the signs. But I think we might be able to get to 6 votes for approving it with the modification that the 2 flanking signs be reduced, so that the number of signs remains the same, but the 2 flanking signs be reduced. I think that just based on what I heard, I think that we have enough people to support that. So, and I think everybody also agrees that there should be, you know, we're appreciative that there is a commitment to restore and salvage the fabric, and a commitment to remove the installations at the end of the lease and to repair the facades, and would like to see that commitment extend further to reinstallation of the salvaged fabric. So Commissioner Shamir-Barron, I know you supported it in its entirety with that one modification about reinstallation of fabric, but would you make a motion for that along with just reducing the size of the 2 signs flanking the entrance, and we'll see if we can get to 6. Okay.
Yes. In the matter of LPC 2008010 4951 Chamber Street, former Immigrant Industrial Savings Bank, individual and interior landmark, African Burial Ground, and the Commons Historic District, a Beaux-Arts style skyscraper, an interior designed by Raymond F. Almirall and built in 1909 to 1912. The application is to alter the interior banking hall, install signage, a marquee, and lighting at the Chambers Street facade, and alter windows and doors at the Reed Street facade. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed modifications to the interior banking hall will help facilitate the adaptive reuse and public access to this interior landmark, that historic fabric to be removed will be salvaged and stored on site, allowing for future reinstallation, that only limited sections of teller cages will be removed or modified, and that the locations of these removals will be done in a symmetrical manner that complements the plan of the designated space, that the proposed curtain system will support the programmatic needs of the space and can be retracted so as not to permanently bisect the banking hall, that the portions of the curtain system will cover or obscure decorative architectural features, they will not result in the loss of these significant features, that the metal curtain housing will be slim in profile and simple in design, clearly reading as a new insertion into the space while recalling historic finishes found within the banking hall, that the center curtain truss will be carefully installed through areas of flat plaster and secured at mortar joints where required in order to minimize damage to historic materials. That while the proposed room enclosures will be visible within the designated space, the enclosures will be located outside the footprint of the designated floor area, will be freestanding with minimal attachment points, and will be reversible. That the room enclosures will be made of simple materials with a neutral finish, therefore will clearly read as contemporary installations while harmonizing with the material and scale of the banking hall. That while the room enclosures towards the Reed Street facade will be visible above the teller booths, it will feature profile cornice detailing, recalling other details within the designated space, and will not call undue attention to itself. That the proposed partitions installed at the Reed Street windows will block out exterior light without altering the windows while being reversible. That the window partitions will feature metal muntins and the interior facing side and neutral painted finishes, thereby recalling the appearance of these monumental windows. That the proposed audiovisual truss system will be installed at existing cornices, will be concealed by metal fascia panels finished to match the adjacent stone, and will recede from view. That the installation of the truss system will allow for equipment to be attached to the truss itself, and that the trusses will be installed through mortar joints where feasible, thereby resulting in only minimal penetrations to historic materials. That the proposed speakers will be installed at the mortar joints of the existing columns and will be finished to match the adjacent stone, thereby reducing the physical and visual impact of these installations. That the new openings at the west wall will be simply designed and facilitate egress and will not result in the loss of highly decorative features. That the removal of one revolving door within the westernmost drum of the Chamber Street entranceway will provide accessibilities and will restore the primary use of the entrance. That the proposed lighting at teller cages and railing will be concealed from view and will utilize existing fixtures, and that raising the heights of the existing historic chandeliers will not adversely impact the presence of these chandeliers within the designated space. However, I find that the plan for removal for historic material is not fully or refined or defined, and that the appropriateness of the work is limited to this specific adaptive reuse and is premised on being reversible. And also recommend, therefore, that the applicant work with LPC staff on an acceptable plan for the removal and storage of historic material, and that the future, if and when the adaptive reuse ceases in the banking hall, the applicant and/or owner will remove and reverse the various alterations and restore the banking hall to its previous condition in consultation with staff, or return to the commission and seek approval to retain and/or make other modifications. With regard to the exterior alteration, I find that the banner signage will utilize a semi-transparent metal fabric, which will allow visibility of these monumental windows, that the proposed linear light strips and spotlights will be small in size and partially concealed by existing architectural features of the building, and therefore will not call undue attention to themselves, that the installation of egress doors at the Reed Street facade will utilize existing window openings and will only result in the removal of simple stone sills, and that the metal window grills on Reed Street will be salvaged and stored on site, allowing for future reinstallation. That the upper portions of the windows on Reed Street facade featured louvered windows. Therefore, the installation of louvers at two lower panes of the center window will not detract from these special windows. However, I find that the proposed new pressure system banners adjacent to the primary entrance are large and will conceal detailed stonework on the ground floor, and that the details of the installation architectural lighting, including attachment points and conduit locations, are not refined. Therefore, I recommend that the ground floor banner signs be eliminated, and that
reduced.
Those ones are reduced, or those ones are the actual banner signs are reduced. Excuse me, right? And that the applicant work with staff to refine the installation details of the lighting.
Okay, and Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that?
Second.
All right, and Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Letby. Commissioner Letby, you're muted.
Aye.
Thank you. And Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 10 in favor and unopposed, the motion carries.
Okay, thank you and good luck. And we'll move to the next item.
The next item on the public meeting agenda is number 2. This is LPC 1933774, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 1215, Lot 18, 1370 Dean Street in the Crown Heights North Historic District. A Queen Anne style semi-attached house designed by Gilbert A. Schellinger and built circa 1885. The application is to alter the stoop and install a barrier-free access lift. Please note this was originally scheduled for the public hearing of June 30th, 2020. It was read into the record that day, but was not presented. So today is the first time that we'll be seeing it.
And
Thank you. And
Commissioners, the applicant.
Okay, and as the applicants get ready, I'll just have a motion to open the proceedings. Commissioner Gustafson, would you make that motion?
So moved.
And Commissioner Chapin, would you second it?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, applicants may begin.
Please remember to state your name for the record. Thank you.
Sure. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Nick Wilder. I'm the architect working on 1370 Dean Street. I'm joined on the call with John Scott from Urban Standard Development, who would be happy to answer any questions relating from ownership side. Want to thank Julianne and Bernadette from LPC for their continued assistance and guidance on this project. It's been kind of a long time coming so far. So 1370 Dean Street is an existing 3-floor and cellar Queen Anne style semi-attached building from 1885. It's located in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, and it's between Brooklyn and Kingston Avenues. The building is presently being renovated and converted from a 1-family to a 4-family condo with interior and a rear addition that was approved under a separate LPC application. As part of the change from a 1-family to a 4-family, the ground floor must be made accessible. We are here today proposing new entry steps and an incline lift to meet accessibility requirements. 1370 Dean Street is located in an area with a wide variety of historic houses. Side here. You can see a good diversity of buildings along the block. Buildings typically range in size from 2-floor single-family houses to 6-floor apartment style buildings. The building is set back about 17 feet from the sidewalk and is separated from the sidewalk with a iron fence. The existing entryway has a wonderful layered archway, pediment, and sunburst motif. The existing stone stoop and cheek walls are relatively modest in their design, with a half-round profile running at the top of the sides. There are recessed panels along the sides here with a floral pattern. The cheek walls are relatively low, only a few inches above the landing. There are existing bolt holes in the facade at roughly railing height that likely give evidence that there might have been a simple railing at one time. So here is the existing and proposed plans. There are 4 primary changes that need to happen to make the entry accessible. The first one is when you enter off the sidewalk onto the property, you're stepping up off the curb and through the iron gate. I'm going to go back one slide here, and you can see right here, there's a little bit of a step right off the sidewalk there that needs to be accounted for. This step up will need to be removed, and the site will have to be locally lowered to match the grade of the sidewalk. The second item is a new inclined platform lift will need to be installed, and that's this right here that will have to run up from the sidewalk grade to the first floor elevation. In addition, a new guardrail and handrail will need to be installed. Item 3 is the stairs will need to be widened to accommodate the possibility of an emergency situation where the lift is being used and at the same time, people are trying to egress down the stairs. And the last item is that the landing itself, the top landing, will need to now align with the top of the first floor, and we'll need to have a 5-foot turnaround space at that location. So here are existing sections showing current design and the proposed design with the new lift and the increased stairs needed. So while the size of the stair is increased, the intent is to construct it using the same profiles, the decorative elements, so that it resemble in character what was there originally. The top profiles and the recessed panels of the cheek walls, the nosing profiles will match what was historically there. We will be installing, obviously, a new metal guardrail and lift that will be painted black to try and blend it in as best as possible. Next slide is the elevations of existing and proposed. And here you can see the widening of the stair right there. And the last couple images here are the renderings of what it will look like. To the left is the existing, to the right is the proposed. Right here would be the lift and the new stair and the railing. And like I noted, we'll have to align the sidewalk with the new elevation there. This is a different view, coming down the sidewalk. Here's one additional view looking in the other direction. This is obviously what the lift, it's an inclined platform lift. This is what it will be looking like. We'll have it painted black. The image on the left is just for reference of what they look like. And finally, we did do some studies and had back and forth with MOPD regarding, and also the local community board about different options. And we did explore, obviously, a ramp was too great. We have about a little over 4 feet that we have to accommodate here. So a ramp was out of the question. We looked at a vertical lift, but that was also not visually acceptable. And then we ran a couple other studies lastly, just to see what if we raised the cheek walls up, what would that look like on the right-hand side? What if we had a hybrid option with cheek walls and a railing sort of built in? Ultimately, we settled on what we're proposing now, just because it was the least intrusive and matched kind of historically what was there. And that is the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, if there are any questions, raise your hand. Okay, Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead.
Yeah, and if you go back to your plan, my question is it because of code that you need that 3-foot additional space from the handicap lift itself? You have 3'8" and then you have 3 feet. Do you need that 3 feet by code? Because therefore you had to enlarge the stair?
We do. It's if in the event that the lift is being used, I still need to provide egress for people coming out by foot. And that's that pathway right there. This is still considered an egress stair leading out of the building. So I have to maintain that minimum distance required.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
My question.
Sorry.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
That's okay. My question is about the railing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you described the original stoop wall as having evidence of the railing, of an old railing perhaps being on top of that stoop wall. And I'm wondering why you made the decision to put the railings inside rather than on top of the stoop wall, because then you could potentially narrow the overall width of the stair if the rail was on top.
It does. I think the reason we chose to put the railing on the inside is that you do have that nice unique profile at the top of the cheek wall. So if we put the railing on top of the guardrail, it wouldn't be as visible. So that was one item that we did want to try and bring back or accentuate. And by bringing the railing inside, you can see that profile of the cheek wall.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Chapin.
Yes, when you talked about the cheek wall before, you talked about, using a lower version. Does the cheek wall, it looks the original to be fairly close to the adjacent property, and obviously it's very low. So you have made the cheek wall as low as you can, I take it.
Yes.
Okay, second question, just the color choice of the cheek wall. You went with the dark as opposed to the original color. Just your thinking on that?
We will likely be providing color samples at the end of the day. We're not necessarily set on the specific color right now. We were happy to match what was there right now.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, and just to follow up on Commissioner Jefferson's question about the extra 3 foot that you need for an egress path, would it be acceptable to create egress somewhere else in the building if you had another door? And would you then be able to do just the 3 foot wide stoop?
The way the interior layout works, I think there's two items. One is it wouldn't work with the interior layout. And I can just, the way the whole building funnels through that one main door. The other item is it's a primary egress path. So it's expected that when you go into a building, you're kind of coming out at the same location as well. So there might be a bit of a code issue, and FDNY might have a little bit of an issue with that. So it wouldn't be ideal, I'll put it that way.
Okay.
We did look at, we had originally tried to move the ground floor entrance to the side, the physical address of it. And again, that was an item where FDNY came back and said, you're not allowed to move, for this particular building, they wouldn't allow us to move the primary ground floor entrance to the back or to the rear so that we could put the lift around there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right, commissioners, any other questions? Okay, so this item was read into the record, and so we have not actually taken public testimony yet. So why don't we move to the testimony portion of this item? And if you're in the room and would like to, or in the meeting and would like to speak, raise your hand so we can identify you. And we'll start with people who signed in advance, if anyone did. So I'll turn it over to our Executive Director, Lisa Kersavage, to manage that.
Okay, so nobody signed up to speak, but I do see that we have Kelly Carroll with her hand raised.
Lisa, I'm sorry, so there were people who did sign up to speak on this application.
Okay, well, let's start with Kelly Carroll and then we'll sort out our list.
Sure.
So Kelly.
Okay. Good morning, Commissioners. Kelly Carroll for Historic Districts Council. This proposal seems speculative in nature, with building code driving the ADA access currently proposed. Providing access is likely not necessary at this juncture. HDC does not support this application, which is a significant alteration of not only the stoop, but the building's facade and proportion. We encourage the exploration of and guidance from the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities to obtain a New York City Building Code accessibility waiver. These waivers are frequently granted to small-scale projects involving properties in historic districts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Let's see, we'll still work with people with hands raised. So Salon on Kingston. I'm promoting you to a panelist. And all you need to do is unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you choose. And please state your name for the record. Okay. Solana Kingston, you just have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello, good morning, commissioners. My name is Amber Mazor, and I'm a neighbor. I live on 1372 Dean Street. And our building is adjacent to 1370 Dean Street. And myself and our condominium are strongly opposing this change. First, we feel that we did not have a chance, a proper opportunity to object this proposal at the community board meeting. This was the first time they did it online when the COVID-19 started, and it was very technically challenged. There was no mention of how to get access to the material to review it before. There was no mention how to join the whole conference. This was not on Zoom, so I was trying to comment and I got kicked out in the middle of my sentence. And this was kind of approved in a way that we feel like almost like hijacked. That's one big problem. But then specifically to the substance of this proposed change, this is not a minor change to the facade. This is huge. They're gonna take the beautiful, elegant, proportional, historic stoop that is just aligned exactly in front of the door frame, and they're gonna change it to something bulky, wide, much wider than the door frame. They're gonna change from three steps to 7 steps, all the way almost to the street, with a lift platform on it. So this will no longer look like a single family cute building. This would look like a public building, like an apartment building. This is very intrusive, and I don't think that we should be forced to live with this dramatic change to this building forever from now on, only because the applicant wants to change the use of the building from a single family to a multifamily, which brings me to a different point. When Landmark approved this application and approved to change the whole facade of the side facade of the building, which almost like double the size, totally visible from the street, this was applied for as a two-family house. Now they're claiming that they're renovating it as a 4-family house building, which is a totally different ball game. And we just learned that on May 22nd, they applied to DOB to do this conversion, and were rejected. So I don't understand why everybody in the public needs to suffer this dramatic, extreme, intrusive change just because they want to turn it into a multifamily and put a lift that probably nobody will ever use this. It's not that they are handicapped people and they need to use this, which I would understand. This is just to comply with some code so they can make more money. So
could I ask you to wrap up your comments, please? Or your 3 minutes have passed.
So I'm saying that they have no reason and no proof of hardship and no similar example anywhere in the neighborhood for such a change. And this should be objected completely, and they should perfectly stay with 2-family house and have a beautiful house, not to change it to a 4-family.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony. Okay, and I don't see anybody else with their hand raised.
Okay, and Rich, do we have any written testimony?
Yes, in addition to the comments you heard today, there was one other letter in opposition from the neighbor, and also a letter recommendation from the community board recommending approval with conditions.
Okay, all right, so I'd like to turn to the applicant now and see if you'd like to respond to some of the comments that were made and maybe speak to the community board review and conditions.
Sure. Community board was, obviously interested in keeping the stoop, as close or, aesthetically as close as possible. So they request that we keep similar details and similar profiles. With response to, the fact that a lift is required for this project. So it's code, and that is what it is. So I'm not quite sure how to respond, other than even if it was a one-family house and an individual needed to use a wheelchair lift, and they could still apply for this application. So that really doesn't change the fact that whether it's a one family or four family, we are required by code to put in a lift. But if it was still a one family and somebody wanted to put in a lift, they should still have that right to put in that lift. So I don't really know how to respond much beyond that.
Okay.
I agree that we have tried to reduce the size of the stoop as much as possible, but there are limitations that have to be maintained.
Okay, thanks. And then just on the some of the testimony, or I think Kelly Carroll mentioned getting a waiver from MOPED, which is actually something that we don't see that often. Most of the time it's expected that landmarks meet code, but there is a possibility of seeking a waiver. And I believe that you've already started to have some conversations with MOPED, and I know our councils have also spoken to MOPED, and I think that they're not very open to the idea of a waiver here. And I don't know if you want to comment on that, or maybe Mark, if you want to also comment on that.
Why don't you go first, Nick, and I'll follow.
I'll just say we've had numerous conversations with MOPD about this. Their stance has been that the primary entrance has to be made accessible no matter what. So they have not granted us any kind of a waiver. We asked to have it around the side, but they denied that request.
And so I can confirm that I've spoken with MOPED and asked them about making the apartment accessible in the side entrance, and was told that they would not approve that, at least at the staff level, and that the requirement was to make the front entrance accessible. And I think for the record, it's true that this is being driven by the decision to make this a four-family home, and that is what's triggering the requirement that it be made accessible, and at the front, in MOPED's view, that the front entrance be made accessible. We may continue to try to work with and push MOPED, but as of this moment in time, we've been unsuccessful in changing their view.
Okay, so I think it's their mandate to ensure that buildings are accessible and through the primary entrance, and that people are not redirected to a side door that not everybody else has to go through. And I know that you also said that you looked at moving the entire primary entrance to the side, and that was not allowed under fire department regulations, I believe. So I think that they will remain firm that the primary entrance needs to be accessible. And I think generally we support the idea of our landmarks being accessible as well. So I see we have another question. So we'll continue with questions, and then we'll move to our discussion. So Commissioner Shamir Baran. Oops. Commissioner Shamir Baran, did you have a question?
This may have been said, and I'm not sure that it'll make anything better, but I'm just wondering if there was an exploration of the front yard being having a ramping system, and whether there is enough room there to switch back and return and use ramps.
We did. It's a lot of ramps. It's 4 feet of grade change, at least. So on, I'm not sure if I still have control of this. This here is roughly what the ramp will look like. So we would basically be starting out right at the edge of the sidewalk there and ramping back and forth. And
you could potentially sort of use vegetation or planting around it, sort of have it look terraced. I mean, is there enough room for making it look like anything but just ramp? I'm glad to see that you got it all in there.
No, there's not. It's nothing but ramp. We also, Julian and Bernadette, brought up possibly doing a hybrid system of ramping from one side across to gain at least one step and then going on up. But then you start to change that view, along the fence with more sidewalk or more paving. So a ramp going up the front there would really it would take up the entire front yard, unfortunately.
Do you have a rendering of that by chance?
Of a ramp?
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't. It was something that we kind of ruled out early. Just it would have been monumental in its size. It would have changed the kind of the grading all around the front of the building, and in addition to along with our neighbor's side. So we kind of ruled that one out.
Would it have also, it would have been the opposite problem, would have reduced your stoop, right? And that's what it looked like in the plan.
I think the stoop probably would have been consumed by the ramp. When you go back to this photo here, this is the entryway. Here are your stairs going down. All this is ramp. So it's just, it became a whole other, a part of the building that would have, I think, taken away from the front. Again, like this all would have been paving. There was no room for vegetation or anything like that.
Right, and sidewalls or railings.
Yes.
Okay. All right, other questions? Any other questions? Go ahead.
I think the only other question I have is whether there's an exploration of and I'm thinking about this because we may see this in the future, and just if we want to have a conversation about it, but and we can do that after the questions. But I guess my question is, if the kind of the entryway portal is actually extended so that all of this might live on what would be sort of an inside vestibule and more interior looking, rather than a piece of machinery on the outside stoop. So I'm wondering if you've explored that, but otherwise we can discuss it during our comments.
I don't, unfortunately we don't have it. There isn't a vestibule, so we wouldn't be able to, you would still have to get, then you would just be changing the interior structure of the building. I don't know actually how physically you would do that. I hear what you're saying. I don't know physically how that could be done, because the whole doorway would have to be lowered more to the grade, and then you could go up once you're inside. So I don't think, physically I think that would be difficult to do.
Well,
if I understand what you're saying, I mean, basically if I were to come in at grade and go in and then be raised up,
I guess I'm describing something that extends, that enlarges the entryway. So right now the entryway is like 8 inches thick, and I'm now talking about making it somehow thicker. But again, this is a completely different proposal, so I'm not proposing it. I'm just asking if there was any exploration of that thinking.
No, there was no exploration of it possibly extending beyond the existing building line.
Yeah, I mean, what it would say in my mind is that there is an addressing of the idea that townhouses that have historically only had steps up to them might be adapted to include a handicap feature as part of their entryway design, and that the question of whether or not that, from a preservation perspective, is a modification that we might think is a positive thing as compared to, for instance, some of this more kind of mechanical systems on the outside of buildings. I don't know, but okay. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Jefferson.
Assume I have to accept the proportional changes to the facade. What if you move the mechanism to the other side, to the right-hand side, so that I don't feel that the landing is overlapping the entry portal? So if you move the mechanism to the right-hand side, it would feel better. I would feel that on one side it works really well and kind of hides the overlapping and the enlargement of the stair as it is now. Have you tried that in elevation as a study?
I haven't tried that idea as a study. You know, we thought about it. We're open to flipping it to the other side. The general thought was, this is the property line. There's a common fence between us. This is a slightly denser where the lift is. That's a denser screen of field, basically, because you have the lift mechanism versus putting it more or less in the middle of the building. So it was kind of seen as not blocking, you're kind of be blocking half that view at that location. So that's why we put it at the property line.
Yeah, I do understand that. I think my issue is just the overlap is so much, 3 feet, and it overlaps the shape, the form. It just doesn't work well. Proportions are off. So I thought if you camouflage it by shifting it, it would work. It's just a suggestion.
Okay.
But I think the 3-foot overlap is only when the lift is actually down and operational, right? So normally it would be stored in the folded position.
Correct.
So it wouldn't
Kind
always.
of as shown, it's in the rendering. That's folded up and closed.
And then if it's in use, it's unfolded and then it has the 3-foot overlap.
Correct.
Okay, other questions? All right, not seeing any other questions. I think that we will move to our discussion, and I think just opened the proceedings, so we don't need to close the hearing. So I'm just going to start to unmute people for the purposes of the discussion. And
no, Sarah, we
yeah?
do have to close the hearing because remember, people did testify.
Okay. All right. So let's do that. So Commissioner Chapin, can I have a motion to close the hearing?
I move to close the hearing.
Okay. And Commissioner Bland would, Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. So the hearing is now closed and we'll move to our discussion. And I think Commissioner Jefferson, why don't you start on this one since you've been thinking about it with some of these questions?
Well, it's a very difficult question, a facade issue. And for me, it's difficult to accept the landing enlarged. The proportion of that changes the whole facade and the building. So I was viewing it as a way that perhaps they could change the color of the stair and landing, and the guide rails be the same color as the facade, and minimize that proportional enlargement. And then I thought about it a little bit more, and I said, if they moved the mechanism to the right, and it would, that edge is so beautiful that if we kept that edge, I would feel more comfortable with it.
Just said.
I was struck by the lack of symmetry and how wide it becomes, but in the end, you know, I'm actually okay with it. I'm more concerned about the design or the material and the design of the rails themselves. They seem a little flimsy relative to the strength of the material in the and design of the fences in the front. So that's an issue for me. And I do want to note that you know, we heard the testimony of the neighbor. You know, what's not before us, I think, and Mark will correct me if I'm wrong, is that, you know, we don't make a decision about whether it's appropriate for this building to be converted to a you know, a 2-family, a 3-family, a 4-family. We can only make our decision about what it is that is offered, the design that's offered to us. We don't get to tell them how they can use the building. So I just want to make sure that was noted.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. And the no is simply that their decision to make this a 4-family triggers the need to widen this stoop. Anytime someone proposes a new use that requires, you know, a change, you know, the commission can look at that change and say, you know, we think it's inappropriate. It's too much of a change. And it's not really talking about the use, it's just talking about the change necessary to accommodate that use. So, you know, is it possible for you all to say, we think this is an inappropriate change? Yes, you could say that this is inappropriate based on the impacts on the building. And that would be, in essence, a decision that this can't be used as a 4-family, in other words. So, so I hope that's clear.
Right, it's indirect though. We're not actually saying.
Correct.
You know,
correct.
Right. It's
Right.
indirect, and I do think it's worth pointing out, as the applicant did, that, you know, if there were somebody in this house, even if it were a single-family house, and there was somebody in this house who needed assistance to access the house, they could come to us with the same application. So I do think the question of whether the stoop is appropriate or not is somewhat distinct from the use.
Yeah.
And that, you know, in this case, the building retains a stoop and it retains details, and it is wider. But I think that the question of whether a different stoop is appropriate on this building to accommodate access could be before us, even if it weren't a change of use. And so we would look at it in terms of the architectural details.
Yeah,
Okay.
just so we're clear, it may be that if this is a single-family home, that there would be no requirement to widen the stoop. That's all I'm trying to say. Is that the issue about, because there's 4 families, the need to have egress by multiple people at multiple times, that may result in a different requirement for the stoop. So it's just you know, that's the code issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Shamir Barron.
I think that I think it has, I realize its complications, and I think it's important for us to think about this and as it might relate to other contexts, because it's every aspect of it is so legitimate and necessary and required. But I'm just trying to think about ways that it can be better incorporated in the somehow the fabric of the masonry or the stairs or the entryway. And I think that that's going to be a challenge and an interesting one going forward. But I think that I have to say that this is appropriate as presented.
Okay. Commissioner Holford-Smith.
I agree that this is a difficult problem that we're probably going to face a lot more of in the future. And I do believe that we should have buildings be accessible. But my question about putting the railing, while they chose to put the railing on the inside, I feel like putting the railing on the inside is a much more modern approach, and I think gives more prominence to the railing. If you look at the LPC 6, you can see that. So you see the railing in front of the stoop cheek wall, and I think if it could sit on top of the cheek wall and harmonize better with the railing, with the fence at the front, that would be more appropriate and could potentially reduce the width a little bit, maybe not a lot, but that would be my suggestion.
Okay. And then I think Corey or Edith, could you move it to LPC 6? Okay, so let's go back to the rendering. Okay, so railing on stoop. Okay. And Commissioner Chapin?
Yes, it is troubling because the extent of change is making a large change to the stoop. And, you start thinking, well, as we need to make things accessible, and we do approve those, to what extent will we be faced with many, many of these occasions, changing the stoop configuration? Of course, sometimes there are other solutions, depending on what needs to be made accessible. And also I started thinking about consequences, because as testimony reflected back in February of 2019, we approved the expansion of this building, which sort of laid the stage for this in that sense. So one of the things we may want to think about as we're letting buildings expand is what other alterations might be necessary in the future. However, we are at a stage where, yes, we need to, if someone came to us, we would approve some kind of accessibility. And from hearing the discussion of the applicant, it doesn't seem like a ramp solution would be superior. And because of the code, they're required to make it this large. So I feel that, that we should not be saying that we are not going to permit this to become accessible. So I think I'll support it, but it's raised a lot of concerns for the future, I think.
And I think, for the future, as buildings become more accessible, but as the city continues to think about, density and buildings have more are going to have more apartments in them as housing is needed. So I think it is something we'll be dealing with more and more in the future.
Yeah, okay. Yes, I agree, especially since we so often see conversions of large things to single family, but I suspect it's going to be going the other way in the not too distant future. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Commissioner Devonshire?
I think, this is a problem. This is a significant change to this building, but I don't see any reasonable alternative. So I can reluctantly approve it.
Okay. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I agree. This is, it's been almost 30 years since the passage of the ADA, and many iterations. And given the historic stoops on many landmarks, this is an issue that we're going to be confronting, in the near future, and soon there'll be a lot more, because it's been taken 3 decades, and people are getting impatient, especially as the population age, and so for us sitting here is obviously the choice between minimal disturbance of the original structure versus dealing with the social needs of and the legislation. So I think this is appropriate. I think it's needed. As Mark said, even for a 1 family or 2 family, if it's not required by code, it's still, as an aging population, this is an issue that we have to deal with and realize is a reality. So I have no problem in supporting it.
Okay. Commissioner Bland?
Huge conundrum here. I just want to spend a few minutes talking about it somewhat personally too. I live in a townhouse, a two-family townhouse that we converted from 4 families to 2 family, but it was a row of 5 initially, all built as single families in 1902. Next door to us is a 4 family. It's a condominium with 4 individual apartments. The stoops are elaborate L-shaped stoops. The only way to, I mean, it was grandfathered, so it didn't have to go through this. I guess it didn't have to go through this system, but there's no physical way of adapting that stoop. For instance, if this law applied, you would have to completely tear it down. I don't know what you would do. It seems to me as if there are some buildings that are not adaptable. They just aren't. We have a huge city with lots of housing types. Here I am railing against the law, and I don't mean to do that because the law is a good law. But when it's applied to every single thing, it's a problem. And I think this is a big problem here. And I'll just say what I'm going to vote against it, just because you need at least one vote against it. I would prefer that our solution be to eliminate the stoop, like so many stoops have been eliminated. You know, we're used to seeing buildings with no stoop. The stoop was eliminated. Bring the whole door down, deal with it on the inside, and let it go. But I think this is an abomination, and I am railing against the law a little bit as it's applied to every single building. So I think there should be exceptions, and I think this should be one.
Lutfi. Commissioner Lutfi? Okay, I think she has stepped away. Commissioner Chapin, did you have an additional comment?
Yes, I just did want to say that I think that the color of the cheek wall should be as close to as possible to the original.
Okay. All right. So, you know, and I think the idea of removing the stoop is an interesting one. It's not the proposal that's before us. It's something that has happened to brownstones historically when they were converted to multiple dwellings. I mean, what often happened is that you sort of had a truncated window, or sometimes you have enough height to have a full window at the former parlor floor entry, and then you have to sort of figure out a door that inserts underneath it. And I think that would be an approach, and could be an approach that's consistent with historic adaptations of these buildings. But I also think that maintaining a stoop is okay. And one of the reasons that I feel comfortable with it is that I do think that there's an effort here to match the details, and I think the materials and the finish as well. And I think that the railings could be improved upon, and maybe they could explore some of the ideas that have been mentioned with flipping it or putting the railings on the cheek walls. But if you look at the streetscape, this is not a continuous row of buildings where there are uniform stoops lined up down the street. And so these two are, which don't even match each other, are anomalous on the block. And there are some actually bigger, heavier stoops further down this block. I don't know if Corey, if we can get to a streetscape. And so I might feel very differently if this was part of a long row with continuous stoops. But given, you know, that there's some variety on the street, the box stoops down the block, and that these two kind of stand alone and currently don't match each other, give me some comfort that an alternative stoop design at this particular building is appropriate, that would then accommodate barrier-free access. So I'm on the side of it being okay. And I think that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think that makes 6 of us that may be in the okay camp, and maybe others. And I think we could vote to approve it, but still encourage them to think about some of the suggestions that were made sitting on the wall and thinking about flipping it and what does that do. And I think also in enhancing the railing design to make it relate better to the historic ironwork in the areaway. So why don't I go ahead and I'll read that and we'll see where we end up. Okay. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, docket number LPC 19-33774, 1370 Dean Street in the Crown Heights North Historic District, a Queen Anne style semi-attached house designed by Gilbert A. Schellinger and built in 1885. This is an application to alter the stoop and install a barrier-free access lift. And I note that Certificate of Appropriateness 1924-500 was issued on February 19th, 2019, approving the demolition of a rear L, the construction of a rear yard addition, and the creation of new masonry opening and rooftop bulkheads. And I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Crown Heights North Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications finding that the proposed alterations will provide barrier-free access at the primary entrance to the building, that the proposed lift and associated rail will be simply designed, typical in terms of size and materials, and finished to blend with their context, that the stoop railings will be typical in terms of their material and finish and will feature a typical pattern of vertical pickets, that the height of the railings will help address a fall hazard. The modified stoop will recall the historic stoop in terms of texture, finish, profiles, and details, that the profiles and however, I find that the details and profiles of the railings do not relate well to the historic areaway fence, and that further details could be explored in consultation with staff, and therefore I recommend that the design of the railings be refined to more closely recall the historic areaway fencing, and that the applicant continue to explore options of putting the railing on the cheek walls or flipping the lift to see if that helps reduce the appearance of the stoop on this facade. Okay, and Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, so Rich, let's call the vote and see where we are.
All right. Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Nay.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire. Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Not present.
Who's not present. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 8 in favor, 1 opposed, 1 not present, the motion carries.
Okay, so that's approved with those modifications, and I encourage you to continue to work with the staff on those. Thank you.
Sarah,
Yes.
before we completely eliminate this, if you don't mind, if you could go back to LPC 3, I just want to illustrate my point. So that's a very good picture there on the left. My house that I was being very personal about could be that. It's exactly one of those houses. In fact, maybe the same architect, who knows? And you see those have, I think they have L stoops. And if such a proposal, let's say one in the middle of that row, came in with the same proposal to make a four family, the only way to deal with that is literally to remove the stoop and redesign it. So I'm not whining here. I'm not going on and on. I'm just saying this is going to confront us in the future, and that example down the road, down the street here, is going to really make it difficult, I think, for us to approve. Whereas your point about the two houses here being different, not part of a row, made it, I agree, even though I voted against it, easier to see that this is an approval, an appropriate way to deal with it in this case. I just wanted to make that point because we're going to be facing this.
Yes,
Thank you.
We are. Okay, thank you. All right, and we'll move to the public hearing schedule.
Yes, so the first item of the Preservation Department's public hearing agenda, number 1 is LPC 20-10913, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 1962, lot 4, 441 Waverly Avenue in the Clinton Hill Historic District, an Italianate style row house built circa 1868. And the application is to modify window openings and install a rear deck.
Commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. Please state your name for the record and you may begin now. Control the slides.
All right, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and the slides. Are the slides going to be put up for me so I can scroll through them?
So the mouse is currently on the first slide. You just have to click your mouse and then you can advance either using the arrow keys or the scroll wheel.
I can't see the slides on my screen.
What's up there right now is currently the testimony slide. Can you see the
Here we go.
there right now?
Yes, I can see it now.
Okay.
Okay. Yep, there we go. Okay, my name is Kyle Page. I'm an architect with Sundial Studios Architecture and Design, and my office is working on the 441 Waverly Avenue renovation. 441 Waverly is within the Clinton Hill Historic District and was located between Green and Gates Avenue. What brings us before you today is the proposed work at the rear facade. This work includes combining the rear windows into a single opening at the basement and parlor levels and installing a small deck which accesses the rear yard from the parlor level. So on the left, you'll see the existing rear facade, and on the right is our proposed single window opening. And then you see the deck and the stairs coming down. And then below that is a photo of minimal view rail system that we're also proposing. So on this slide to the left, we can see the proposed removals. And on the right, we see the proposed opening at 8 foot 5 inches wide with the right side pier aligning to the existing pier width and measuring 2 foot 4 inches wide and 1 foot 10 to the property line. The opening would be 17 foot and 1.5 inches high with a 1 foot intermediate spandrel. The left side pier would be 3 foot 1 to the property line, which matches the width of the proposed stair assembly accessing the garden. So here we see the existing proposed basement plans. In the proposed plan at the top of the page, you can see the line of the 3 foot wide proposed deck above, which would be supported by 2 small non-occupiable storage piers, one of which includes the steps down to the rear yard. These piers would be finished in stucco to match the rear facade. Here we can see a mock-up of the window and the stair assembly, or the deck, stair and rail assemblies. The window opening is shown in blue tape and would maintain the width of the left pier and the head height of the existing windows at the parlor level. The orange flag material represents the top of deck, stair, and rail assemblies. So this slide shows the 12-degree diagonal view angle where the rear facade may be seen from Washington Avenue through the Hollenbeck Community Garden and an access drive serving PS 11. 441 Waverly is outlined in red. So here we can see the rear facade within the view angle from the Washington Avenue sidewalk. On the left is a photo taken January 30th, 2020, and on the right is a photo taken on June 21st, 2020. And in both these photos, we've mocked up the scale and location of the proposed opening. So in this slide, I actually reached through the bars of the community garden to take pictures. Again, on the left, the photo was taken at January 30th, 2020. And on the right, the photo was July 9th. So I was given access to the community garden on the same day that we performed the mock-up. On the left is a photo I took from the rear of the community garden fence, and you can just make out the left side of the window opening with the blue tape. And on the right, I found the most visible location I could find within the garden to shoot this rear facade. And this photo was taken about 10 feet high, just because the 6-foot garden makes it, it's not very visible, but with the selfie stick, I was able to reach up and take the photo from about 10 feet above the ground. So this slide shows the neighborhood context of the rear yard. 439A to the north, or page up, includes a first floor deck atop a full width basement extension with the 2-story addition above it. Our building 441 Waverly is in the middle. You can see our proposed deck and stair. And then 443 South contains a first floor deck over a basement extension that was just recently approved and is under construction now. These are Google satellite images of the rear facades, again showing that same context. Are there any questions?
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Raise your hand if you do. Okay, I think your presentation was very clear, and so there may not be any questions right now. So we'll move to public testimony and see if we have anyone who's signed up to speak or in the meeting waiting to speak. If you are in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you. All right, Lisa.
Okay, in this case, we do not have anybody that signed up to speak, and I do not see anybody with their hand raised at this time.
Okay, thanks. And Rich, do we have any written testimony?
We do have a resolution from Community Board 2 recommending approval.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I think the presentation was very clear and the proposal pretty straightforward. And I think that we don't have any questions. So I'm going to move to close the hearing, and then we'll begin our discussion. So Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
Motion to close the hearing.
And Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed. And I think, as this presentation was very clear, there's minimal visibility through this garden of this double height window that's before us, and a deck, which I believe is even less visible. So let's start our discussion. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you like to start this one?
Sure. Yeah, I think it was a good presentation, and I happen to agree with what you're saying. The visibility is minimal, and I also feel that there's one other. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that the windows look fine.
Okay. And Commissioner Bland?
Yeah, this sort of renovation of a townhouse is becoming almost de rigueur. We see it all the time. I think this is done very well. Its visibility is more than in some cases where it's not at all visible, because there are little pieces of visibility, but mostly from a distance. So I think this is very appropriate.
Commissioner Chen?
Agree.
Commissioner Devonshire?
I think it's appropriate.
And Commissioner Chapin?
I agree. It's appropriate.
Commissioner Holford Smith?
I agree. Appropriate. Very modest.
Barron?
I agree. This is appropriate.
Commissioner Gustafson?
I think the applicant is setting a new standard here, requiring all future applicants to use a selfie stick to determine visibility.
I worked with Richard Lowry.
There's going to be a lot of angry applicants out there. any event, I think it's appropriate.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Appropriate.
Okay, great. And I agree. I think that the size of the opening is, while double height is modest, it retains masonry on both sides and retains the scale and character of this house. And the deck is consistent with other decks within the context. Okay, so Commissioner Lutfi, would you like to make that motion?
In the matter of docket 20-10913, 441 Waverly Avenue, Clinton Hill Historic District, an Italianate style row house built circa 1868. The application is to modify window openings and install a rear deck. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Clinton Hill Historic District. I recommend approval finding that only the parlor floor level of the proposed double height window assembly at the rear facade and portions of the rear deck railings will be visible from a public thoroughfare from a limited vantage point over rear yards within the context of secondary facades, that the proposed double height masonry opening will align at the northern edge with the windows directly above, thereby helping to reinforce the fenestration pattern at the rear facade, that the metal spandrel at the double height window assembly will help retain a sense of the historic floor levels and the residential scale of this row house, that the stucco-clad masonry storage room supporting the rear deck will not be visible from a public thoroughfare, and that the work will not detract from the significant architectural or historic character of the building or the historic district.
Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, and Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion carries.
Okay, that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
Next item is item number 2, LPC 20-10654, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 1074, lot 41, 188 8th Avenue in the Park Slope Historic District. French Renaissance style row house designed by William J. Dilthey and built in 1897 to 98. The application is to modify masonry openings.
And the applicants have joined the meeting, and please state your name for the record and you may begin the presentation.
Morning, am I on?
Yes, you're
Okay.
on.
Hi, this is Eric Clifton from Mesh Architectures. Thank you. This is concerning the house at 188 8th Avenue. I don't see my, okay, can I just click through here now?
Yes, you can just advance the slides by clicking on the first slide.
There it goes. Great. Thank you. Okay, so this is where the house is located. It's on 8th Avenue, one house away from the corner of First Street and Park Slope. This is a plan showing the photographs. We are talking about the rear facade of the building. We're replacing all the windows in the building, but they're all being done at staff level, except for the one that we're going to show you right here on the rear opening. So this is the rear of the house. You can see here the opening we're talking about is minimally visible from this particular vantage point on 8th Avenue. You can see it right here in the bottom left the most. You can see a little bit up here in the top left. You can't see it here from view number 3 when you get past a certain angle. And this is a view of the front facade. We're not proposing any changes under this application, but it's just provided here for reference. This is the rear facade taken from the rear yard of the house. So what we're talking about, similar to the last application, we are talking about combining the door and the window into a larger opening. We are preserving the outer extents of the openings and taking away the brick pier that is in the middle here to create a large opening. The key point here is that in doing so, we're removing a stained glass transom window that's here above the door. This is a reference photo of the next door neighbor. There's no transom here, so we don't know the history of why that stained glass transom is there, but it's not a pattern that repeats itself on the block. Similarly, we don't feel that it is a particularly special example. I'll show you a picture in a second. This is a plan showing the area to be combined. This is showing the proposed sliding glass doors that are going to take the place of the window and door. This is the rear facade, again showing the dimensions, showing the existing condition and the proposed condition. This is a photo of the stained glass window. I would say it's not a particularly special example of craftsmanship. It's something that we can't really use anywhere else. There's no other place in the house that naturally lends itself to including a window like this. So there's really no way that we can just kind of move it over and use it in a different spot. These are the details of the sliding doors that we're replacing it. They are wood framed with triple glazing to much improve the thermal envelope of the house. These are just examples of the product in other installations. And this light gray is the color that the frame is going to be on the outside. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, so not seeing any questions, I think we will see if we have anyone here to speak. Lisa, do you have any testimony?
Yes, Kelly Carroll signed up to speak, and she has her hand raised too. Okay, Kelly, I brought you in.
Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. The Historic Districts Council opposes removing the stained glass transom. This period feature does not obscure any view into the rear garden, nor does it obstruct any significant passage of light into the home due to its small scale. Its minimal presence should be incorporated into the new rear facade opening or elsewhere in the house, but it should not be unnecessarily discarded. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. And nobody else has signed up, and I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, thank you. And Rich, do we have any written testimony?
We do have a resolution from the community board recommending approval with conditions.
Okay. All right. And so I'll turn back to Mr. Lifton. Can you speak to the community board and what the conditions were?
Yes, it would be difficult to incorporate that. It would entail having a transom going across the whole top, which would incorporate additional structure to support it. So it would obscure a lot of ultimately we're trying to get a lot more light into the house and open up the rear. And in putting that transom in, keeping it in there and having a transom row across the whole thing, we'd have more structure, more obstruction to light. In addition, the stained glass window itself does not let very much light in. So that would also be an obstacle in and of itself.
Okay. So was the community board's approval conditioned upon exploring how to reuse the window? Is that what they asked you to do?
Actually, I corresponded with the representative of the community board, but I never received the actual text. I heard that they did it with conditions that they wanted to be reused elsewhere. That's all I heard. I never got anything more detailed.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Commissioners, do we have any final questions?
I think the owners are here too on the call, if they can speak too.
If they'd like to speak, they can speak.
Hi, my name is Martha Gary. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. I do want to just make a comment about the stained glass window. First, I love stained glass windows, and it's part of the character of the house. However, the picture that Eric showed is a beautiful picture, and the actual stained glass that we have is very dark, and it is just doesn't lend any light. No light goes through it. And I think that is one of the reasons that we gave considerable thought to keeping it or, not having it, but just the light is the big issue for us. It's not that we don't want to have a stained glass window. The other thing is that I think Eric has looked throughout the house and we've looked and we don't see a space for that. And so that I think is one of the main reasons that I wanted to come on and just let everyone know how I felt as the owner of the house.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any final questions? Okay, then I think we will move to close the hearing. Commissioner Devonshire, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that?
I so second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. So the proposal before us is for these alterations to the rear facade. There is a stained glass window that does not appear to be a feature found in any of the other buildings in the row. And I think it's uncertain what its date is. The applicant and owner have testified to its quality or commented that it wasn't the highest craftsmanship. And the proposal is to remove that and to enlarge the openings to create sliding windows and doors that open onto the deck. So let's start our discussion, and why don't we, sort of working around the table, Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you like to start this one?
Sure. It's always sort of regrettable to lose something that's a little unique and different, but I don't find that this piece of stained glass is compelling enough to warrant finding it inappropriate. So I think that I can find that this is appropriate.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin?
I think that it's really appropriate. It's very similar to other things we've approved, and I support it as presented.
Commissioner Devonshire?
Along with what Fred was saying about how often we have this sort of an alteration, I'm sure that if there had been large expanses of glass easily available when these houses were built, every one of them would have a rear facade that looks like this. I think this is fine. With regard to the stained glass, I hope it doesn't get trashed. There is a stained glass guy down on 5th Avenue off of Garfield who has a display of different neighborhood stained glass windows, and I'm sure he'd be happy to take it rather than see it go.
It's a great idea. Okay, Commissioner Chen?
Appropriate.
Okay, Commissioner Bland?
Very appropriate, and I like Michael Devonshire's idea about the stained glass guy. So be sure it goes there, not into the container.
Commissioner Lutfi?
Michael, you're always a wealth of interesting and helpful information. Thanks for that. And I agree, this is like the last project, this is very appropriate and very much what we would approve.
Commissioner Jefferson?
Appropriate.
And Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I think typically I'm an aggressive protector of the stained glass, but if there's an example of a situation where it's acceptable to remove it, this is it.
And Commissioner Shamir Baran?
I think this is appropriate.
Okay, great. So I think we have a consensus to approve. And Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you read the motion?
Sure. In the matter of LPC 20-10654, 188 8th Avenue in the Park Slope Historic District. A French Renaissance style row house designed by William J. Dilsey and built in 1897-98. The application is to modify masonry openings. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Park Slope Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will only be visible from limited vantage points and at an oblique angle from First Street. that the stained glass transom window to be removed is the only one at the building and therefore is not part of a cohesive design that would be diminished by its removal. That the modified masonry openings at the rear facade will only remove a limited amount of plain brickwork and will not substantially alter the character of the secondary facade. That the door assembly to be installed in the modified opening will match the fenestration at this facade in terms of materials, finish, and details, and that the work will not diminish the special architectural and historic character of the building or the Park Slope Historic District.
Mayor Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
And Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Letby,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 10 in favor and unopposed, the motion carries.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good luck. And we'll move to the next item.
The next item is number 3, LPC 20-02968, an application for a certificate of
Didn't expect a huge
appropriateness
fight on
in the
that.
Borough of Brooklyn, block 5095, lot 36, 106 Marlborough Road in the Prospect Park South Historic District. An American colonial style freestanding house designed by John J. Pettit and built in 1908. The application is to install HVAC units at the roof and to replace windows.
And Commissioners, the applicant has joined the hearing. Please state your name for the record. You can click on the slide to advance the slides and you may begin. And please remember to unmute yourself, sir. Thank you. If you could just unmute yourself. There we go.
My name is Norman Cox, and I'm an architect working with the owners of this single-family house undergoing renovation. It's located in the Prospect Park Historic District, Prospect Park South Historic District, and was designed in 1908 by John Pettit. The first part of our application concerns installation of condensers for a new central air conditioning system. Due to the large footprint of the house and small lot, there is very little space on the property for condensers. The north side yard, in the right photo here, is too narrow and occupied by light wells. And the south side yard, the lower left photo, is occupied by the house's driveway. The rear yard in the center photo is less than 12 feet wide. The rear property line aligns with the stone band at the left of the photo and the rear of the garage visible in the distance. The nicely landscaped yard directly behind our house has an ornamental pond and is regularly used by the owners of that house. We believe that locating the condensers in the rear yard will result in objectionable noise to the neighbors. So we propose that the best location for the units is on the flat roof of a second floor extension at the back of the house. That's seen in the upper left-hand photo on this slide. This is the only available rooftop location on the house. Locating the units on the roof, the yellow highlighted area on the right-hand drawing, will minimize visibility and noise to the adjacent lots. This position preserves the character of the rear yards and has the least impact on the neighbors. From Marlborough Road, the units on the rear extension roof will not be visible. They are blocked by the main roof of the house. This is a view from the southeast. And this is a view from the northeast. From Rugby Road, the roof location is concealed by foliage most of the year. The top photos show the view from Rugby in the summer on the left and the winter on the right. The rear of the house is also visible from Church Avenue to the north. The bottom photos show the seasonal views from Church Avenue. These two photos show a mock-up during the winter views from Rugby Road and from Church Avenue below. To conceal the units from these vantage points during the winter, we propose to construct a wood screening fence, seen here on the elevations. The fence will be just high enough to cover the units. The fence will be finished with a penetrating stain in a color to match the roofing tiles. This rendering is a view from Rugby Road. This view is from Church Avenue. The fence will also help to minimize noise by deflecting it upward. The second part of our application concerns the windows on an enclosed porch on the side of the house. These photos show the south side of the house, which has a glass enclosed porch. The enclosure consists of individual wood frames holding panels of pastel colored leaded glass in a harlequin-like pattern. Behind the glass panels, and unfortunately concealed from view, well-proportioned columns are positioned on the three sides of the porch. Based on discussions with a stained glass restorer who is familiar with the neighborhood and the house, we believe the leaded glass panels are not original and were installed many years after the house was constructed. The panels are in poor condition. They were not well constructed to begin with, and the wood frames and their mountings are deteriorated. Many pieces of glass are missing or damaged, and lead cames are in bad shape. There are many other leaded glass windows in the house, and it is obvious that neither the style nor quality of the porch panels are comparable to these existing windows. These views represent the current elevations of the house. I'm going to skip over the next slide because the elevation views are not current. We propose to replace the leaded glass panels with new wooden glass panels. Following discussions with Landmark staff, we shifted the position of the panels toward the interior in order to reveal the columns. The columns will regain their role as an ordering and structural element, as well as restoring to view an important original feature of the house. How do I back up?
You can use your up arrow key to go to the previous slide.
There's quite a bit of lag here, sorry.
You wish to move it to the previous slide?
I need the previous slide. Okay. At the north and south ends of the porch, the columns will flank new doors, providing access to an open front terrace and to the rear yard. At the long south side, the new panels will be hinged. The existing wood floor will be removed, exposing the original brick, and a new stone sill will be installed between the columns to divert rain away from the new panels. The columns and the wood trims around the porch will be fully restored. Along with the ongoing restoration work on the interior, we believe that the new windows on the porch will preserve the dignity of the original design and enhance the character of the district. That's the end of my presentation. Please regard the next slide, as the details are not coordinated with the final design.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Not seeing any questions. We'll move to testimony. Lisa, do we have anyone signed in to speak?
We do not have anybody signed up to speak. And I also do not see any hands raised.
Okay. All right. And Rich, do we have any written testimony?
We don't, and the community board waived review of the application.
Okay. All right. So commissioners, any final questions? The two components of this application are the HVAC units on the rear roof and the removal of the leaded glass windows at the porch and installing new windows set behind the columns. Okay, so no final questions. I think we should move to close the hearing. So Commissioner Bland, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
So second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing is closed and we'll move to our discussion. And as I said, there are these two components to the application. Commissioner Devonshire, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I think this is an appropriate application. That the that later leaded glass is possibly the worst leaded glass I've ever seen, and I would have suggested it came from Home Depot if it was more contemporary. I think everything about this is fine.
And Commissioner Chen?
I agree.
Okay. And Commissioner Bland?
Yeah, big step forward to remove that worst glass ever seen in Commissioner Devonshire's opinion. Pretty bad glass, but then to realign wood and glass panels on the inside of the exterior columns was a great move. And I think the AC system, even with the surround fence, is good. The fence will not only visually disguise, let's say, the equipment, which I don't care that much about, but I think it'll discourage noise as well. So I'm in favor of both of these improvements for this wonderful house, fabulous historic district. This is really one of the greats.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
I agree. This is a wonderful historic district, as Fred said, and I think the changes are appropriate, and that it really, the house looks so much better as a result of this, and it's much better tied together. And I agree that the condenser is minimally visible, and it's a proper move.
Okay. Commissioner Jefferson?
A very handsome design.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson?
I think we can see here on sheet 9 the work on that porch is just terrific. So definitely appropriate in that regard. I'm not terribly thrilled about the HVAC equipment on the roof. I know it's I can accept it because it's minimally visible, but I hope that's not the start of a trend, because you know, that even hidden with that surround, it's not particularly attractive, but it is minimally visible in this case, so I can approve it.
Commissioner Shamir Baran?
Yes, I agree with all the comments. This is appropriate and approvable.
And Commissioner Holford Smith?
I agree. I think that especially the porch is a huge improvement over the existing conditions. So I find it appropriate.
Chapin? Commissioner Chapin?
Yes, I agree with the comments of other commissioners, and the porch is particularly really nice improvement. And the air conditioning, well, you know, I was going to ask who would be baffled and kept on off the building, but it is screened, and I think that the subsidiary, being on a subsidiary facade, it's fine. I can approve this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner Devonshire, would you read this motion?
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I went to the wrong page. In the matter of 106 Marlborough Road, Prospect Park South Historic District, LPC 20-02968, an application to install HVAC units and roof and replace windows. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed rooftop HVAC units will be installed on the flat roof of the rear addition, will not damage any significant architectural features of the roof or the roof. That the HVAC units will be visible only from the other side of the block through adjacent driveways, will be screened by a wood enclosure with a neutral gray finish that blends with the surrounding roofscape. That the stained glass panels at the porch are in poor condition, are not original to the building, and their installation in front of the original porch columns obscures those significant features. That the new clear glass window panels will be installed behind the porch columns, exposing them on the exterior and reestablishing the open character of the porch. And the work will not detract from the special architectural or historic character of the building or the historic district.
All right, and Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Seconded.
Okay, Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Jen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devinger,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 10 in favor and unopposed, the motion carries.
That's approved. Thank you. And
Thank you.
that's the conclusion of our morning session. So we will now break for lunch for 30 minutes and we'll return at 12:45. If you are watching on YouTube, you can resume watching it live if you go to the main YouTube channel, LPC YouTube channel at 12:45. And members of the applicant team and public who are participating in the 3 items after lunch, if you're present now, we'll need you to exit the meeting and re-enter the meeting at 12:45. And commissioners, you can just turn your cameras off and we'll mute you all. Okay, and we'll see everybody back at 12:45. Thank you.